Welcome to the Rabbi and the Pastor. I am the pastor. My name is Kent Philpott.
And I'm the Rabbi, Rabbi Tzvi Bar David.
So here we go, and the topic for our program is who or what is Israel?
Do I get to start?
Yes,
All
you
right.
get to start.
I want to start with a little bit of Hebrew grammar. So Israel is pronounced in Hebrew Yisrael, and it's a compound word, and it ends with the syllable el, which is the God word in every Semitic language: Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic, Allah, Elohim. All those God words in Semitic languages come from a syllable el, arguably meaning the power. The power. And Yisrael, as we know from the book of Genesis, Yisrael was the new name that was given to Jacob after he struggled with the angel and wouldn't let the angel go until the angel blessed him. And the angel blessed him with a name. And that name means the one who has struggled with God and with human beings and has prevailed or just survived. So that's number one. Let's understand what the word, which is a Hebrew word, means. That's for starters.
Yes, Israel,
Right.
the one who Jacob wrestled with God, the grandson of Abraham,
Right?
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob,
Right?
father of the 12 tribes of Israel.
Right. See? Because that's his name.
Right.
That's his name. In other words, the name was not originally the name of a country. The name was not the name of a person. The country was called Canaan, and English, or Canaan in Hebrew. The low-lying land from the hills of Hare Yehuda, from the hills of Judea, to going west and down to the Mediterranean Sea. And it became the personal name of an individual because of an ordeal that individual went through and lived to tell the tale. And thus, on some level, the real name of the Jewish people is not Jews or Yehudim, which is Jews is just a translation of the Hebrew word Yehudim, but the real name is benei-Israel, the children of Israel who used to be Jacob, right?
Thank you, Svi.
So it's an ethnonym.
There we go.
It's the name of a tribe or a set of tribes.
Right. So now, when
Originally.
we ask the question, what is Israel? Your answer would be?
There are many answers. So Israel starts out by being the name of one individual, and that name then becomes the name of a set of tribes, like a set of clans in Scotland, right?
Sure.
Right, a set of tribes that were related by marriage, spoke roughly the same language, Canaanite Hebrew, whatever, right? And then, and I'm going to fast forward, it becomes that tribal name, or that ethnonym, that name for a group of people related by blood with a common religion, right? Presumably a monotheistic religion centered around Elohim, God in Hebrew, right? The one God. The land that they settle in, once they set up their first kingdom, what do they call that kingdom under their first king Saul? They call it Mamlechet Yisrael, the kingdom of Israel.
And in terms of the calendar, Svi,
Right.
we're looking at roughly 1000 BCE.
Exactly. You've certainly studied your biblical history, Kent. I can see that.
Thank you.
Right. So it becomes the name of a political entity,
Right.
that splits into two. There was a civil war after the death of King Solomon, who was the last king of the United Kingdom of Israel. Splits into two kingdoms: the northern kingdom of Israel, the southern kingdom of Judea, thus Jews.
That's where the name
Jew is
comes
simply
from. And Judea comes from
Yehuda,
Judah,
right?
one of the sons of
12
Israel,
sons, right?
who was given that area. There was Judah and Benjamin.
Given that area from Jerusalem south towards Bethlehem, probably down to Hebron, and so on and so forth.
Right.
Mountain country.
Mountain country.
3,000 foot mountain country.
When people say you go up to Jerusalem, you went up.
You seriously?
I've been there.
Oh yeah.
And you go up.
You go up 3,000 feet.
Oh
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yeah. So Israel is the name of a person. Israel is the name of a collection of clans or tribes. Israel becomes the name of a polity, of a kingdom that ruled over non-Israelites, as a matter of fact.
Yes, it did.
Many non-Israelites
Yes, absolutely.
at its height under David and Solomon.
Yes.
And the northern kingdom is conquered, let me see if I can get it right, by the Assyrians, I believe under the general Sennacherib. I got to check that out.
That's true.
And then about
But the year,
hang on, 200 years roughly before the conquest of Judea by Nebuchadnezzar, who is the king of the Babylonian Empire, which was the successor empire in what is now Iraq to the Assyrian Empire.
I forgot, I got the
586 BCE.
And 722. And 722 is when the Assyrians came down, and the
150 years,
so-called 10 tribes of Israel, the northern tribes, they became known as it was Israel and Judah.
Israel and Judah.
Israel and Judah. Then
Right.
in 722, the Assyrians came down and they essentially eliminated what that nation state was.
They eliminated the nation state by enforcing a policy of ethnic exile, which Stalin, by the way, did the very same thing in cleaning out the Tatars from Crimea.
Okay.
And colonizing it with ethnic Russians. So this notion, this concept or this notion, this policy of ethnic exile, exiling entire ethnic groups of people, is something that's been done for a long time, and based upon the notion that if you take a people, not genocide, but if you take them and you make them live someplace else, they're going to be weak and powerless, and they're not going to revolt against you. Also, there was a belief in the Middle East at the time that whether or not, there was a belief in the Middle East at the time that your God or gods, in our case one God, in the case of, say, the Moabites, multiple gods, right? Your God or gods were only powerful within the boundaries of your kingdom.
True.
There's a fancy Greek term for that.
Henotheism.
Henotheism. And of course, both Sancheriv and Nebuchadnezzar were well aware of this, possibly believing it themselves, don't know. And so they took advantage of the belief system of the people in the Middle East, and by exiling the group would become politically docile.
And they brought in other people, and you had the rise of
the Samaritans.
The Samaritans.
Right. They brought
the Samaritans.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So where am I going with this? I think what I need to do is I need to wind forward 2,500 years to the current moment. And if you were to ask, and in the current moment since 1948, we have, again, an independent state that calls itself Israel, which happens to be multi-ethnic, roughly 80% Jewish, roughly 15 to 20% Arab. And I don't mean the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. I mean in what is the green line, the green boundary borders of Israel prior to 1967, who vote in parliament, by the way. And there are other small ethnic groups, Armenians and others, who live in Israel. And indeed, arguably, there are lots of Russian non-Jews who are the spouses of Russian Jews. There was an immigration of some 1 million people when the wall came down in East Berlin, who left the Soviet bloc countries, specifically Russia, and brought their spouses with them, in some cases Jewish, in many cases not Jewish, and didn't convert. So there's lots of people in Israel, not just Jews, by a long shot. Although the Israeli Constitution sets up for itself a contradiction, a paradox, which is difficult to work out. On one hand, it talks about the arisal in the historic land of Israel of a Jewish state, and indeed Netanyahu and others, he's the current prime minister of Israel, talk about the need to preserve the fundamentally Jewish character of the state. And the contradiction is that at the same time, the Constitution of Israel, and indeed most of the people in Israel, believe in a democracy, in one person, man or woman, one person, one vote. Arabs, Circassians, non-Jewish Russians who happen to be citizens of the country, one person, one vote. It's a bit of a problem, right? It's a bit of a, because Israel is not yet, and maybe not ever, a theocracy. It is, by and large, a democratic republic.
Right. Now, let me go back a little bit, just a little bit, into the history of Israel, because the southern kingdom, Judah, made up the tribe of Judah and Benjamin.
Right.
And from the Babylonians, they came down.
It came down in 586.
I'm sorry, 586.
580, right.
Of course, I'm sorry,
Right.
Svi. 722, the Assyrians, 586,
Right.
the Babylonians,
Right.
and for a period of like 50, 70 years, it was before
Cyrus the Persian.
Cyrus the Persian,
Right.
who the Persians overwhelmed
The
the
Babylonians.
Babylonians
Right.
and let the people return.
That's right, with a
The
subsidy.
story of Ezra and Nehemiah.
Right. They virtually regarded Cyrus, Koresh in Hebrew, also in Old Persian, they regarded Koresh, Cyrus, almost as the Messiah,
Yes.
as the Mashiach.
Yeah. Isaiah brings him up, I think, in chapter 43 or something like that. It's part of second Isaiah, you might say, since it's about 200 years after
Yeah.
Isaiah lived.
It doesn't make sense, right?
Right, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
It gets Christians confused a lot.
Here's the nub of it for Jews, is the issue for Jews, if to phrase it in Jewish language today, is not who or what is Israel. The issue, Israel is a country, which is a multi-ethnic, multi-religious country with ostensibly religious freedom for all. Jews, Muslims, Christians of various sorts, all, and others. The real issue is, for Jews, what's a Jew and who's a Jew? And I want to tell just a little anecdote to give you a hint of the complexity of this question for Jews. So I used to pray, used to daven, that's how you say to pray in Yiddish. I used to pray at a synagogue in Santa Monica or Venice on the beach. Beautiful place, Mishkan Tefillah. Had a really good friend named Jeff, and his wife was a convert to Judaism. Family was ostensibly Christian. I don't think they were very active, but in any event, I made a remark that I thought was fairly innocuous, and it had something to do with, well, we're Jewish, and so that means we're supportive of Israel. Doesn't mean we're not supportive of the rights of the Palestinians, but it means we're basically supportive of Israel. And she blew up at me, because she was not a friend of the Israeli government, specifically having to do with, in her view, Israel's unwillingness to give Palestinians the right for national autonomy, for their own state. And she said, no, it's a religion and only a religion. And I was really like almost in shock. And I thought about it for a long, long time.
This is what I want to get at.
And I realized,
right
so the way a Jew would phrase it is not who or what is Israel. The way a Jew would phrase it is, what does it mean to be a Jew? Is love of Israel part of Jewish identity? The very prayer book, and this woman knows Hebrew well enough to pray at least phonetically, and the English is on the facing page, so she knows what she's saying. The prayers are full. Our prayers are full of prayers to God, begging God for the return of Jewish sovereignty in Zion. Zion is another way of saying Israel. Political sovereignty on that piece of land. So she prays it. She says the words, but she doesn't agree with it. This is not the first time this has happened in Jewish history.
No, I understand.
Right.
So Svi, now,
yeah.
So there's always been a confusion in my mind.
Yeah.
Exactly what is Israel? There's a theology we talked about before.
A Christian
called,
theology.
A Christian theology called dispensationalism that was very popular through, let's say, the first 2/3 of the 20th century. It's been on the decline, but came out of a group of people called the Plymouth Brethren in England, and then established in America. There was a Bible called the Scofield Reference Bible, and it gave a picture that all of Israel would be redeemed. They would all become essentially Christians, or it's very difficult to ferret out. I used to be that, a dispensationalist, hardcore. Changed my mind once I got challenged on it, and somebody said, prove it from the Bible. Couldn't. Had to change my theology, which was not easy to do. But the idea was that on the return of Jesus, all that was Israel would be saved, and Jesus would establish his headquarters in Jerusalem, and the temple would be rebuilt, and for 1,000 years, just like the book of Leviticus, just like, we find in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and so on, we have that kind of...
I mean, the priesthood would come back.
Yeah, the whole thing.
And serve in the temple. Oh, right. Okay.
And so the idea that was, well, don't evangelize Jewish people with the gospel, because we're almost at the second coming. We're almost there. Jesus is about to return any day.
That's your theology.
No, that's not my theology. But that was what that was. And so let the Jews alone. Let the Jews alone. Don't evangelize them, because they're all going to be saved when Jesus returns. Okay.
Why is it necessary for Jews to be saved?
Here's what happened. That's why you have a large block of Christians who are so interested in the nation of Israel that it survive as a nation state. Not that I disagree with it. I am for the nation of Israel.
Me too.
I stand with Israel as a nation.
Right.
But I also know in Israel, there's all kinds of non-Jews there. Yeah. Like you were saying. All kinds of people.
Yeah.
Now, so if all Israel will be saved, what if you're living in the United States? What if you're living in Czechoslovakia? What if you're living in France? And you're Jewish? How many people have Jewish DNA in them?
Lots.
I'm sure I have Jewish DNA in me. I have a grandfather's name was Khan.
K-A-H-N?
No, C-O-N-N. But I'm pretty sure it got twisted around, and there's a Jewish background to my grandfather's side on my mother's side.
Could be.
My mother told me as much. So she says, you're part Jewish, Ken.
No kidding.
Oh, yeah. Maybe a little teeny bit, but so many people are.
Right.
So the issue is, who's Israel? What Israel? Is it a nation state? What in the world is, in fact, Israel? Now, in the second part of the program, I'd like to explore that in the second.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to bring a mainline Christian view of how a person like myself views Israel. So do you see Israel as mainly just a nation state, or a much broader community?
Well, it's a little fuzzy for me. I mean, if I want it to be, and the reason it's fuzzy is because our tribal name, centered about the worship of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, of God, was benei-Israel, the sons and daughters of this guy, Israel, Jacob, right? The tribal name becomes the name of a polity, of an independent kingdom that lasts for a while, comes back with the Maccabees, gets knocked over by the Romans, etc., and then is back again for God knows how long. It's up to God. So on one hand, so in rabbinic literature, very often rabbinic literature will use the word Israel or Israelite to mean Jew. But people who aren't rabbinic scholars, the average Jew in the pew or the person on the street, will say Jew, Judean, right? We'll say Jew. And there the arguments start all over again, namely, is a Jew someone who observes all the mitzvot, all the commandments? Or is there such a thing as being culturally Jewish, right? Like certain foods, depending if you're Sephardi or Ashkenazi, they're a little bit different. I know the Ashkenazi ones, bagels, herring. The truth is, this is Polish food. What we're talking about is Polish food. Challah, egg bread, and so on and so forth. So is being Jewish a cultural thing, or is it a religious thing? Or I tend to see it as both. I don't have a problem with that. So the word, but I would say in the current context today, if you were to say the word Israel to a Jew, and more than likely to a non-Jew, people say, "Oh, Medinat Israel, the state of Israel."
The state of Israel.
It's a political thing. They occupy territory. They have an army and a navy and a, this and that and the other. They're a political entity, and Jew is cultural and religious. Some kind of, and depending on who you talk to, it's more one or more the other.
When my wife and I go to the Jewish Community Center in Somerville.
I know it.
And I love that place.
Yeah.
And I get to talk to the guys because they will see me on television.
Right.
And they'll say, "Oh, we know you."
Right.
And so when I go, there's a lot of elderly Jewish men there.
Right.
Elderly Jewish men, and we get along so much. We have so much fun together, Stevie. I can't tell you.
Right.
And I meet with one gentleman every other week, and we just sit down after the workout and we talk together. He's in his early 90s, really an incredible guy.
Be gesund. He should live and be well.
Oh, he's an atheist.
Yeah.
He's an atheist.
Yeah.
And I meet these guys over and over again, and they're part of the JCC, right? But they say they consider themselves to be secular Jews.
Right.
They don't even go to synagogue, except on Yom Kippur.
Right. And Passover.
And Passover. They'll go then.
Right. And that's not even in the synagogue. That's at home. But that's fine. That's fine. Here's the thing, and what you're getting is Reb Tzvi's take on secular Judaism, because I'm not a secular Jew. I'm some kind of religious Jew of Ashkenazi background, Eastern European background. And what I would contend that what a secular Jew calls Jewish culture, because they have little or no use for religion or religious practice or belief in God or whatever, what constitutes the heart of secular Judaism are the ethical commandments.
Yes.
And you cannot take that away. A belief in social justice for all, in fairness, in truth, right? In fighting oppression for anybody, not just oppression of Jews, oppression of black people or anybody else, right? There are certain fundamental values, and I would argue that those values come right out of our primordial culture when we were a tribe on a land 2,500 and 3,000 years ago and more, right?
Sure.
And there's oddly enough a bit of archaeological proof for that. Now, I forget. There was a dig at a garrison city 18 miles west of Jerusalem, down the slope of the mountain, in the direction of what is now Tel Aviv. And Jerusalem was surrounded by a ring of garrison cities, of fortresses, right?
Sure.
So evidently there was somebody who was literate, who could read and write in Hebrew, ancient Hebrew script, not our current script. And he wrote on a broken potsherd, on an ostrakhan. He wrote something with ink, and then he fired the ostrakhan, and archaeologists discovered this broken potsherd, and they were able to, there are several interpretations because parts of it are fuzzy because where the break was, but the ostrakhan seems to say, at least this is my favorite interpretation of the several interpretations that I've read in the archaeological literature. It is the duty of the king to promote social justice, to rehabilitate the poor, l'shakem ani. The word means the same thing in modern Hebrew that it meant then, let us say 3,000 years ago, right? It is the duty of the king to champion the poor, the widow, and the orphan. And it's like, this is who we are, formally religious or not. It's about good social values.
I've always seen that at the JCC.
Yeah.
To bring justice and mercy to the people who need that.
Yes.
And it seems to be that is the thrust and the content of so many Jewish people, whether they believe in a deity or not.
Right.
And they're always a little shocked at me because, you know, I say, well, that's good. I'm glad you're doing that. We need that, you know, and to keep the Jewish culture alive, to encourage Jewish life and so on, whether you're a deist or not, you know, believe in a God or not. And I understand that, and I support that. I support the nation of Israel, and I am not I'm not an alt-right Republican.
I'm glad to hear that, Kat.
Okay. I just want to make sure. The homeland, the Jewish homeland,
Right.
for so many people. I was once again reading through the history of the Jewish people that led up to the Nazi event. Was horrendous. So many horrendous events that took place, and the interesting thing to me is, why were the Jews always picked on? And the reason I have come up with, because they were always beneficial to every culture that they were part of. You could say, well, the jealousy, they had too much power as a smaller group, an ethnic group. But I think that one of the reasons why so many people have made Jewish people their enemy is because they're the people of God. That somehow it reminds people of God. And it's part of that anti-God sentiment that people will, in their degradation, will go to. And here's these people who, to them, represent God.
For a Jew would say God and God's Torah, God and God's commandments.
It's the Torah.
Not only for the Jews, but for all human beings, like the 7 Noachic laws, right?
Yeah.
So I would actually agree with that. I agree with you there.
Okay.
Yeah, we represent not just God, but the rules.
That's true. That's true. Are you getting ready to do it?
Yeah.
Okay, we got to look in this camera.
Okay.
All right. May
the peace of God be with you. Shalom.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above.